Hello, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to Digital Mosaic Building a Home, a live stream behind the scenes revisit of the Coriolis piece, What is Home? An Obscure Kingdom in Opera Buffa. It's you, always you. My name is Devin Sneathen, he, him pronouns. I am joined today by Christin Call.
Hi, she, her pronouns, and I'm the co founder, co artistic director, and the current interim executive director of Coriolis Dance.
So, tonight we're going to be rewatching one of the live performances of What is Home and commentating over the top as we go with Kristen and the main cast of the show. In between arcs, we'll take some time to go deeper into what we saw and into the developments and themes throughout the piece. You can also, while you're watching, send in your own questions through the YouTube chat. We'll get to those throughout the evening as well. So if you have anything that you're curious about, go ahead and pop that in the YouTube chat as we go. We'll be keeping an eye on that. You also probably saw some examples of the self-portrait as a home prompt in the pre-show slideshow. And we encourage you to draw one of those of your own. You can post it on Instagram under the home selfie hashtag. We'll be monitoring that. If anybody posts their self-portrait as a home, we'll also take a moment to visit those throughout the show. If you're rocking a particularly comfy setup, you can also post that using the what is comfy hashtag, and we'll take a peek at that as well. We want to take a quick second, I think, to talk about the Coriolis Patreon before we get started. This evening's program is part of the Digital Mosaic season, where we're reaching through the digital maelstrom to stay connected to you. We've launched a Patreon as part of that effort. It's a monthly donation option with perks that give you an inside look inside the company. We're also in the midst of our annual fundraising campaign. If you sign up now for the Patreon, your support will be matched by our board for a total of up to $4,000. So even if at the $5 tier over the course of the year, that would net an additional $60 commitment from the board members.
Yeah, which is huge for us. And we're really thankful for all of you who have kind of stuck with us over this last year. It's really your support that has allowed us to pivot in this way to offer some live streaming events. And we're really grateful that we're able to do that, and also to keep our commitment to those that are joining us tonight to pay artists for what they do. I want to touch base a little bit on this theme of tonight, building a home, because there's some acknowledgments that I feel like we should make. We are on the traditional homeland of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, and they are people who are still here, and they are people who are honoring their legacy and their heritage with the land. We've all had to navigate our relationships around home this past year, and I also want to acknowledge that there are those who are still continuing to experience homelessness, especially in our own city of Seattle. Lastly, I want to acknowledge the deep relationship that exists between poverty and race in our country. This work deals a lot with the different tiers and classes of our society, and I want to acknowledge that I make this work from my own place of privilege, and that deep relationship is omitted in this work, and I did not feel comfortable and capable of telling that story at that time. I do feel that it is a story that attempts to go beyond just my own perspective and utilize some of the research and the interviews that I conducted, but I was really wanting to go beyond just my own lived experiences. But I do want to acknowledge that the idea of home and how we get to that feeling and understanding is a huge topic, and there's so many things to bring to light about it, and I'm really excited to get to some of those topics more in depth tonight.
All right, perfect. Thank you for that. I think it is time now to bring the cast on board and say hello to everybody. We got all 5 members of the original cast, core cast, joining us today. Say hello, everybody. How are you? So glad that you could make it with here today with us. I'm going to give everybody a chance to introduce themselves sort of individually, and I think Stacy, if you want to start.
Oh, I think you're on mute, Stacy.
Faux pas, my bad.
It
Hi,
happens.
I'm Stacy Brenner, she, her pronouns, and I'm a contributing dance artist with Coriolis Dance. In this work, I played Allison, who is the activist of the group. She's an aspiring humanitarian who has worked her way to a place of control in the world, but is a bit uncomfortable with the position that she's obtained and wants to make more of a difference in the community around her.
Perfect. Thank you. And Elby, say hello to everyone.
Hi, I'm Elby Brosch, he, him pronouns, and I'm a dancer in the work as well. I play the character Spence, who is the enactor. He begins his journey as really eager to take on Mac's plan. He's looking for a role model, he's looking to be proactive. He's a little bit weak and easily manipulated, and you'll see where that goes during arc one.
Awesome. Maddie, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Maddie or Madeline Gregor, and I played Jackie in What Is Home. She was the most vulnerable of the group in the class system. She was at the bottom with no power, no control, and really just trying to find a way to raise her status without really seeing any options.
Thank you. Anna, say hello.
Hello, I am Anna Puzycki. I am a dance artist in the piece as well. I played Dastamakis, or Mac for short, who is kind of the ruler of the group. He lives at the top of the food chain, you could say, in terms of power dynamics. He definitely has the greatest amount of resource and privilege and power. And he has to go on a bit of a journey to kind of confront when his plan is not necessarily supported by the community that he is in, and kind of reckon with what that means for him. He finds some growth in the work.
Thank you. And Melissa, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Melissa Sanderson, she, her. I'm a dancer in this work, a choreographer and educator here in Seattle. I played Camille in this piece. Camille is the artist. She is the experiential prism of the world, or this household that we are in. She knows the world very intimately, but holds no power within it. And throughout our work, she becomes really motivated by being able to lift Jackie's voice up.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That is the 5 core cast members. We're going to get into the show soon, but before we get started, I want to start with just a small bit of setup to set the viewers up and let them kind of know what they're getting into. What is Home? It was an evening-length performance with supplemental pre-show installation elements. It debuted at Northwest Film Forum over 3 nights in July 2018. The home on the stage that you'll soon see and its residents were presented as a sort of meta layer artifact of the What Is Home Museum, which was the set of pre-show installations attendees had a chance to explore before the performance began. Both Daniel Christensen as Puck and Lauren Lumley as Faye acted as docents and guides to that museum. So attendees already had a chance to meet and interact with those 2 characters, and we'll see them and talk about them shortly. Kristen, what kind of setup would you like everybody to have before we get started?
So hopefully most people had a chance to look at the performance footage before the event now, but you can always go back and look at it later. Just as a kind of an overall summary, this is a story about a household of people, and they have conflicting motivations and desires for what they want to happen and how they want to be in this world. They struggle to get along. They continually fail to connect with each other. They get caught in a cycle of mistakes and unforeseen consequences. Sometimes they're malicious towards each other. So one of the big questions of this piece is how how does this household stay afloat? And is there a way to affect change so they could all thrive within it?
Great. So we're about to dive into Arc 1 of the show. Kristen, what should we be watching for or paying special attention to as we watch this first part of the piece?
So right at the top of this arc, you'll notice some Shakespearean dialogue happening between the two docents. That is derived mostly from Midsummer Night's Eve. I borrowed and I embellished quite liberally. You'll also notice that the dancers use sound and text as an extension of their physical movements as a way to express their characters throughout. Just in general, you can notice like there's a lot of histrionics at work here in the way that the dancers move and speak, and the music, and the way that events unfold.
Perfect. I think that's enough setup. So it is time to jump into the footage. So let's head on over and get started. So again, we'll be talking over the top of this as it goes. First things first, we open on the home as the stage. This is Lauren Lubney playing Faye, and we're about to be joined by Puck. Those are the two docents, the guides of the museum, and they are observing this artifact that is part of this museum. Kristen, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the role of Puck and Faye in relation to this piece?
Mm-hmm. So they act almost as sort of proxy for the audience in a way. They react to things unfolding, they comment on things, and they also provide a bit of respite and relief in between some of the major action sequences to give you a little bit of space to breathe and contextualize. They are characters who are on the outside of the object, but they really care about as well as take care of this object. So they're really motivated to observe it closely, and they want the best outcome possible for it.
I think we're probably about to get into the first bit of dialogue. It's been sort of silent observation up to this point. But Puck and Faye speak in a very effective sort of Shakespearean dialogue for the most part. It's definitely integrated here and there. What drove you to write those characters that way?
I was really interested in. I've always been interested in the heightened language of poetry, the density, and the kind of frictive energy that it has in kind of exploding outwards in meaning, and where Shakespeare is sort of like an easy draw in a way, because he was such an expert at doing that. I knew I wanted to draw from existing text, and I started looking at different pieces, and realized that this work from these sections from Midsummer Night's Dream were really allowing these characters to ask these questions about home, about this household in particular. Puck wants to know, he's a little bit greener in terms of being a docent. Faye's maybe seen the cycle of this like living diorama more times, and so he's asking questions that the audience might ask, like, what is it? What is it doing? How does it start? Why is it here?
Perfect. Melissa, why don't I bring you in, because I want to discuss the role of the dancers in this part of the show. It seems like you're moving kind of in slow motion, almost awakening and exploring the space. Can you tell us a little bit about what mindset you're in as a performer at this moment of the show.
Yeah. So the cast is very slowly kind of seeping in, sinking into our world, our home that we know, but we're just awakening our senses. And the gestures that we're doing are coming from like a bank of gestures that we created, and then we're improvising, switching it up each time, choosing which gesture to do. Earlier, I don't know if you noticed, but I was holding like a shell towards the ear, and I remember that became kind of a regular gesture, a go-to gesture for this piece, like being able to hold an encapsulated um, world close to your ear, close to your heart and soul.
Yeah. I think that we'll probably see that kind of repetitive language, those small gestures of motion that held a deeper meaning and were maybe utilized at certain moments when the characters needed to express certain emotions. Is that off base? From my, that's sort of like what I remember seeing often, is this library. Oh, this is an interesting bit. Kristen, you were prompted, you had Puck and Faye basically prompt the audience to get up and greet each other. What was the meaning or the hope in prompting that from the audience?
It's sort of a continuation of the pre-show interactive installations, in which I'm trying to set this tone of people feeling really welcome, really seen, really heard, asking them to kind of be brave and doing these things and becoming neighbors with the people that they were next to.
Perfect. Excellent. Let's see. Now, it seems as though Puck and Faye are taking their seats and the show is about to begin proper. Now, what we're hearing now is a series of recorded excerpts that of all your voices, with a lot of sort of deep text that I think was kind of rich and hidden meaning. Is there any specific recollections of those phrases that you have that come to mind? This one's open to basically anyone.
Well, one that I just heard myself say is the "and still without the need for eyes," which I think really accentuates Max. He doesn't need to look at the world to know where he stands in it.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have to observe to know that he's at the top. So that one popped up for me.
Perfect. Now these sort of quick vignettes all serve, I think, as quick character introductions. Let's see, I guess Jackie was more at the center of the one that we just saw. They're so fast, I don't know if we'll be able to get into all of them deeply, but let's try and catch the next one. And whoever's the focus, I think it'll be Allison. Allison, Stacy, why don't you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, I think it's just sort of marking, sort of introducing her as sort of this not yet complete person. And I think some of her not yet being complete is in that she is missing this community of everything around her. It seems too disparate for her to feel whole.
Thank you. I think Mac has a quick character intro here. Anna, obviously dramatic and powerful. Is Mac's sort of normal state of being?
Yeah, I would definitely say that's true. He kind of appears downstage all of a sudden and is like, "Okay, hold me," which feels very Mac.
And I think next up for these little vignettes would be Camille's. So let's see what we can get from that. Melissa, if you have any specific recollection.
Hmm. With this lake moving around, it's kind of reminds me of like a lighthouse, and how Camille's character is, she knows the world very well and has a broader perspective of it.
And
She
then,
really does kind of shine a light eventually in the piece.
yeah. And then Spence is the last vignette. Elby, if you have any more insight into your character?
Yeah, I definitely come from a place of, my character comes from a place of privilege, and uh, he's kind of exploring where he wants his position to be and who he wants to be. So he's like a little bit malleable in this moment, but definitely from a place of privilege.
Excellent. Let's see. We're starting to get some of the first, I think, coming out here, some of the first sort of vocalizations, which become more prominent, I mean, as the show goes on. Christin, why don't you start talking a little bit about why the vocalizations were such an important part of this piece and how you got to including them the way that you did?
Well, part of what I've been moving towards in performance works is ways to incorporate text and poetry into the language of the performance. And I had an experience with Lauren Lubney, actually, who is also a director, and had sort of gained some insight on ways to find vocalization. And I knew that I really wanted to bring this into this work, but it was really the first time also that I'd delved this deeply into it. I'd had things that were like spoken monologues in previous works, but this was the first time that it was integrated into the process of making the piece.
And I think the characters now are getting a chance to sort of show themselves off a little bit and develop their own character individually a little bit more, and including some more vocalizations. It's going so fast, it's hard for me to pick any particular character and ask them to go deeper into the choreography as we go.
Well, each character had sort of their own set of gestures.
Right.
And so you do see those in a compiled way in these introductions.
If I remember correctly, I feel like in creating these little introduction solos, I believe the process was a little bit of some guided creation of our individual character gestures, but then also forming them into a story that sort of basically gave the audience your life, or an introduction to your journey as a person. So it was almost like a little biography with our gestures as well.
Yeah, I think that's what I recall too, and I do remember them being pretty self-directed also.
Which I think probably comes up frequently. This piece was developed over a long period of time, and a lot of the cast was deeply involved from really early in the creative process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the contributions of these performers are what make the work what it is. It would have been a different work with different people, for sure. There was a lot of investment required.
We're moving into the second song of Arc 1, and it gets a little bit operatic at this point. And we have two things going on at once for the first time, I think, using the multi-level stage. So real quick, Anna, why don't you talk about what's going on up on the upper level, the penthouse of this stage?
Yes, up in my lair. So I have kind of seduced Spence with my power up to the top. I kind of think about the beginning of the show as Mac looking around at this beautiful home that he has and deciding to tear it down because he has the time and the privilege to do that and make this new plan that he has. So he invites Spence upstairs and says, "This is my plan. Let me show it to you. It's great. You look great here. Aren't you comfortable? Now I've introduced it to you and you can go do this work." And so that's kind of the manipulation that's happening up there.
And then on the lower level, Maddie, Jackie's has a sort of solo going on at the same time. Can you tell us a little bit about this sequence of dance and what you were hoping to communicate?
Yeah, so in the rehearsal process, one of our activities was to write a story and then to improvise after. And a lot of the movement that you're seeing now is some of that movement that occurred from the story that I had written and then pieced together with a kind of a warped version of our original phrase, and then adding sounds that would evoke feelings such as despair or anger. So yeah, it's kind of all of those ideas mixed together, which then kind of becomes her first telling of her life, telling of her story.
Thank you. And then, of course, while this is going on, there's two characters with Stacy and Melissa sort of observing basically Jackie solo and also reacting and to what they see at the same time. And Allison, Stacy, at this point, you attempt to help Jackie. Can you tell us a little bit about these attempts?
Yeah, this is Allison's first attempt to provide some kind of aid to Jackie, and perhaps she's a little overzealous in her excitement to see a place where she can perhaps provide some change, and in doing so, maybe is a bit too aggressive and not quite meeting Jackie where she's able to absorb the help, and so she fails and is feeling defeated and retreats back to sort of her own place after this.
Excellent. And Mac, or Anna, playing Mac, I noticed a quick recoil there, which stuck out to me. What was that about?
Well, I think what's happened here is that Mac has discovered this beautiful artist in Camille, Melissa's character, and has kind of followed with intrigue and is led over towards Jackie. And when he realizes that he's made contact with Jackie, he recoils out of disgust.
And Melissa, observing the process, doesn't seem very impressed.
No, not at all. She is not enticed by Mac whatsoever.
I would also say that is the first point where I think Jackie has someone help her, even if it's like a little small moment out of like a kind heart and a selflessness, just in the reaching down that Camille provides. Which kind of then foreshadows what happens later on.
Great. And then Anna, this solo is maybe a display of Mac's flamboyance and power. Anna, tell us a little bit more about what's going on here, please.
Yeah, so this moment is kind of goes from one place to another quite quickly. It's this moment where Mac is like going to assert his power and really have center stage, and then is met with kind of criticism and maybe even mocking behind him, and throws what I like to refer to as a grandiose hissy fit. Like, he really just does not have any experience with not being just supported and handed what he wants, so he screams. Yep.
And I remember we called this the King Kong solo.
Yeah. It was like smashing the little town.
Yes.
Yikes.
You are this giant that can just kind of smash things without
Yeah.
repercussions.
And does. So, yeah.
And does, yes. Let's see. Moving into the next section of the piece, fairly soon.
Beautiful singing
Yeah.
happening.
There's a confrontation now between Mac and Spence. Elby, can you tell us a little bit about this confrontation? What Spence's role in it is?
Yeah, so I previously was learning Mac's plan in the penthouse, and it sounded like really great. I was really enticed by Mac, and now we're kind of getting into the nitty-gritty details of what actually needs to happen to make Mac's plan fulfilled. And so now Mac is basically like, okay, you have to put everybody in line. You have to do all of my destruction for me. And I don't feel Spence does not feel very good about it, but is kind of too weak and manipulated to say no. So now I've taken all this aggression and I'm going to take it out on every single character in the cast. So there's a series of aggressive duets starting now. Just a passing on of aggression.
Terrorizing the home, but the original sort of negative emotions came down from Mac.
Mm-hmm. And you'll see, like, the first is kind of the most aggressive, and then the second is still aggressive, and the last, Spence is starting to realize, like, oh wait, I don't like what I'm doing. This feels bad. It feels bad to hurt people. And then you'll see me take that right back around and throw it at Mac, because then I blame him for everything that I've done. Instead of taking accountability, I lash out once again at Mac. It's a very toxic situation.
And throughout this whole confrontation, Mac is basically just hanging out on the side, sort of absorbed in the mirror on the side. So why is that? What exactly does that mean?
I think that if we go back to the motif that I kind of mentioned at the beginning of without the need for eyes, Mac kind of has sent his bidding and expects it to be done, but doesn't want to get his hands dirty. He doesn't want to be involved. He is just kind of up in the niceness of his own world, and so he doesn't want to have to see it, I don't think.
Perfect. Confrontation here wrapping up. Spence feeling pretty bad. At this point, Mac will reascend to the penthouse. There's a lot more sort of vocalization. There's basically a monologue here. Do you remember any of these specific lines, either Christin or Anna, and what meaning you got from them?
I don't know if I can't tell if Kristin's talking or not. I can't
go
see.
ahead.
But okay, well, I think the big ones that stick out for me here are the I am all the raindrops, I am the entire damasking cloud. I need my eyes, I need my eyes. And I think it's kind of a big moment of grief for Mac, where he has for the first time really encountered any big backlash in his life and isn't being given what he wants. And so it's this moment of, what do I do with this? My entire reality has been challenged, and I don't know what to do with these feelings. I can't do anything positive or effective with them. And yeah, this idea of raindrops and cloud, it's like the feelings are so big, they're so massive.
Yeah, it's like he is the weather. He is the infinite dispersal of the atmosphere, is how he thinks of himself. And yet he's now finding, as if he's kind of gouged out his own eyes. I think there's a reference to Oedipus in there somehow. Yeah, he is feeling like for the first time, like, oh, I have to do things, or like the things that I am making other people do, I maybe have to account for those. And
They said no. What?
yeah.
So arc one basically ends at this point in complete and utter destruction and failure. The docents have returned to the stage to sort of assess the situation, basically, and maybe to give a little bit more insight to the audience on what they had seen. And the flashlights, the accusatory sort of flashlight. Can you maybe talk a little bit about Daniel and Faye's role, and especially Daniel with the flashlight?
Yeah, I think he's really shocked by what he just saw. This is not what he thought home looked like. So he's angry. He's upset. He thinks the other people laying on the ground are dead. That's what he asks Faye. And then he's lashing out here at Mac's greed and selfishness and his like opulent display. And then it's really Faye who diverts that in a surprising way, maybe, in that she doesn't address his words directly. She starts to tell him this story about a time they were hanging out together, just sitting on a cliff, looking out over the water, and they see mermaids appear. And the kind of micro moment, the cosmos of that moment, that is happy and magical. And she says, that's home. And
There's also here a little bit more sort of direct interaction with the audience, which I think is not entirely normal for an evening length dance performance. And I guess I wanted to ask a little bit about why you brought the audience in as often as you did, and why you asked them to do this call and response, basically. What did you hope to?
well, it was partly because I did not want the audience to be passive to what was happening. I wanted them to be able to participate and also take some ownership too of the story that was unfolding. And so this kind of call and response, in which Faye is like getting more and more distraught and really worked up, it brings the audience along. And kind of helps with the digestion of these really big feelings.
Okay, and that, I think, is where we're going to stop
pause.
arc one, and we're going to jump back and say hello again to everyone, and sort of try our best to explore that arc a little bit deeper, talk about the major themes, anything that we maybe missed while it was going, because there is so much happening at once. So first, I want to do a quick check and see. Also, YouTube, if you have any questions about that arc, now would be the time. We will address them during this sort of break in between the arcs. But let's see. For summary, for additional exploration, do you have any avenues that you would like to go down?
Well, I mean, Mac Mac's story is kind of at the forefront of this arc. Um, Anna, do you want to kind of talk a little bit more about what it felt like to be in that place of like a huge meltdown for your character?
Yeah, he doesn't really start off on a very positive foot, does he? Um, yeah, I think it was a lot at the front of the show to get there right away. I think in my past experience as a performer, that's like you get to a climax like that of performance closer to the end. So to get there right away is an interesting thing for his character. But I think to then to go from there, he has like kind of moments of exploration of who he is and how he fits into the world after this. So yeah, it's like this big explosion of energy at the beginning, and he's not done being dramatic, but he does then later do some of this kind of exploratory and investigative work. So yeah.
And then there were, I think, a couple of characters that sort of existed more as observers and not necessarily players for this portion in Arc 1, namely Camille and Allison. So I maybe wanted to give Melissa and Stacy, both of you, a chance to talk a little bit more about your character through that arc, and even if they weren't pushing things forward, what they were observing and their thoughts, feelings through that, and how they reacted to it.
Yeah, Camille definitely noticed Jackie's lack of power and control, and lack of resources and lack of voice in a way in this world. Um, Identified that as something that's unacceptable, and also identifies the abuse of power that Mac has, and Spence as well, and is fed up and not okay with it, and unsure of how to move forward, but recognizing that this is not okay.
Thank you. Stacy, do you have any additional?
Yeah, a little bit on what I already said about how Allison is just, really wanting to affect change, but and she, like Camille, sees that Jackie is perhaps that avenue for that. But I think uh, less of just sort of taking time to observe and assess in the way that maybe Camille does. She just kind of like flies right in, and doesn't really think about how her actions might contribute to the problem, or at least might not help it very much. And I think that a lot of what Allison spends her time doing in this first arc is um, she kind of sits in the background, almost being sentimental about the home and about maybe what it used to be, and it, a little trickier to see on screen, but she spends a lot of time just, exploring the physical environment
Right.
and retreating from the people of the space,
Mm-hmm.
trying to kind of almost relive better times in this home, rather than facing the current issues.
I remember one of the viewpoints, which was our way of improvising some scenes with material, with choreographed material or improvised material. Um, we did do some explorations of what what did the house look like and feel like to each character. And I think I remember, Stacy, that Allison's house had old peeling wallpaper. Is that, do you remember
Yeah,
that? Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, she definitely, I do remember that. Yeah, we explored, and so that whole opening entry sequence, Allison is actually sort of like rubbing her hands along the back wall, uh, and peeling away some of the old strips of that wallpaper. Um, and she, every time something kind of goes wrong, that's her place of retreat, is back to that wall, back to her her old old wallpaper, and I think there's even maybe this is coming later, but she actually is even at times trying to like repaste the wallpaper, trying to make change by fixing the physical space.
Excellent. We do actually have a couple of questions from YouTube, mostly around the set, the sort of strange nature of the two-floor set. So I guess you can, Kristen, go into a little bit of background on how that came about and why you decided to why you decided to perform it on that set and how it even came to be that way.
The original set, well, it pre-existed What Is Home. There was a piece made by Paige Barnes, who is also a local choreographer, and she had this set constructed and actually had 3 tiers on it. It sat in the Northwest Film Forum, which is where the piece was performed, and for like a couple years. And it was converted into like a game show set that happened, oh gosh, I think like on a monthly basis or like a semi-regular basis. And so it had been repainted, things had been moved around. Anyway, I sort of got to inherit this set once I knew that I was working with Northwest Film Forum, which was so exciting because I love site-specific things. And so I was able to work with the person who built it originally and move some of those poles around so that they were a little bit more patterned and friendly to dancing. Clean up that top penthouse level a little bit so it was a little bit better to dance on as well.
Yeah. Let's see. I think we have time for one more question from YouTube. Eileen asks about the part of Mac. So Mac, the way that we talk about Mac is a male character in the story, obviously played by Anna, female. I guess the question is, was that a conscious choice early on, or would it have been different at all if the character of Mac was played by a masculine presenting person?
I don't know. It didn't. I don't know if this is. It didn't really matter to me. We were developing the characters pretty much in tandem with people coming into the cast. And I know that I was influencing some of that a little bit. I don't know, Anna, do you have a clear memory of why Mac is masculine?
I mean, I think that was established before I joined the work. The character was actually created before I joined. I came in a little late. But I think that I know that we talked a lot more about the focus. I mean, yeah, Mac does feel like a male, and maybe that's because of the kind of historic references of the kind of character that he is and the way that that's existed in human history, that kind of power and privilege. But in terms of like me being a female playing that character, it was more about cultivating that sense of dominance and really strong energy. But yeah, I wasn't actually there for that. The original conversation.
Thank you. I think I'm going to attempt here to take a look at some social media posts. Some people have submitted under the "What is comfy" hashtag.
Nice.
So let's give this a try, see how this works. It did not work. Hold on. I can fix this. I just have to change this window here. There we go. This is from Eileen Quenin on Mercer Island. Has a little group of people together and a cat, all very comfortable
very
on their bean bags. looks cozy and comfy. So thank you for your What is Comfy submission,
Yes.
Eileen. Very, very much appreciated. And then want to take a quick second also to acknowledge some of the donors from today. Eileen, who also donated $92.88, I think. I'm reading that correctly. Thank you very much for your donation. Andrea Puzycki also donated $50. Thank you very much for your donation. And Emily Curtis donated $10. Thank you so, so much for the donation. Very, very much appreciated. I think now we will move on to Arc 2. Kristen, before we move into Arc 2, is there anything you would like to set up for viewers?
Sure, yeah. So the first kind of attempt to come to some kind of, I don't know, even just like a stalemate as a house, truly failed. And it's changed the temperature of the house. It's now become really cold and inhospitable. So you can notice the way in which the different characters express how cold they are, which is probably the very exact opposite of how they're feeling at this point. But and then we've talked a little bit about how Mac is interested in the artist and what happens. You can notice what happens after his ego has kind of been bruised a little bit, how he gloms onto that character.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's move into it. Start Arc 2. Okay. So the first thing that happens here is the horns arise and start to basically sort of reawaken the cast, it seems like. The failure of the house is now, I mean, I guess the question that I'm trying to get to when we're watching this is this like a reawakening? Do the dancers, does the cast and the characters, do they remember their previous failure?
Yes, I think they do. Yes, for sure. Yeah, it's their house has fallen, but they still have to build it again.
Okay.
And they also have to face the consequences of what has happened before now.
And you notice, of course, the blue lights, everybody slowly waking up and maybe dazed, confused, cold.
And you'll see that this is actually a lot of the same movement from the very top of the show, but expressed very differently. And that there isn't as much energy. There's a sense of defeat. There isn't the same kind of rhythmic quality to like going through your daily routine has rhythms. Something has broken from those kind of habits.
And Melissa, Camille seems to be sort of one of the first to really actively awaken and become more alert and aware, and is being maybe shadowed a bit by Mac. Can you talk a little bit about the interaction, the feelings between those two characters, and what Camille is expressing at this time?
Yeah, Camille is definitely frustrated and isn't shy to let people know.
Yeah.
And there she is pointing fingers, saying, "No, this is majorly in part because of your selfishness and your lack of accountability and lack of responsibility." And yeah, she's about to do one big circle with this pointed finger. Again, like a lighthouse reference.
Yes, and this pointed finger, I think, ends up going straight to the audience.
Yeah.
um, which I remember being in the audience feeling kind of intense. Can you talk a little bit about maybe the intent of directing it again back towards the audience?
Hmm. I think it's coming from a place of accountability and remembering that we need to all hold ourselves accountable for a sustainable world where everybody is valued.
And then there's some dialogue coming up over the speakers. Again, some pre-recorded dialogue from all of y'all. And Allison, you have a moment here, front and center. Stacy, can you tell us a little bit about this moment?
Yeah, similar in the first arc where we got to meet a few of the other characters and them sort of tell their story. This was Allison's chance to tell her story, and I think though coming from a place of the frustration of what has happened in arc one, um, so it's a little bit more of her just kind of trying to make sense of what it is she wants and what she's hoping to accomplish.
So I guess the two characters that were sort of more in the background during arc one are now more front and center as they sort of reckon with what happened and maybe seeing a chance to affect change.
Maybe.
Maybe. Um, everybody here retreating in the corner, looking very cold, huddling together. Let's see.
I do remember from Allison's little monologue there that she likens herself to like a toy airplane made out of balsa wood. One of those, really easy to construct. You put little dabs of glue down, in like 2 minutes you're done. And Icarus, the idea of this like kind of flimsily made, enthusiastically maybe, but flimsily made way in which to try and reach the sun. All her ambitions to like really make a change, to make an impact in her world, but she doesn't quite have the tools yet to be able to do that.
And we're watching sort of a lead bit of motion. It seems like everybody's sort of following behind Camille at this point in time. Camille and the artist as a leader. Let's see. Sorry, Melissa, I'm trying to find a way to make that a good question, and I can't. But maybe you can still tell us a little bit more about that anyway.
I think this is the moment in Camille's arc where she's stepping forward. She's very motivated by what she sees as unjust in this world, and she's stepping into the role of leadership and saying, "Hey, you all see this too, right? Let's do something about it." And here she's disappointed in Mac as Mac is slipping away. Mac is deciding, I'm not so sure about this. I think this is a little too challenging for me and what I'm used to.
We saw Spence kind of go off in his own as well.
Also retreat, yeah. Maddie, this is, I think, something we're going to want to ask you a little bit about, a section that is known as Jackie's Tears, sort of more extended solo. This is an intense bit of choreography. Can you tell us about what Jackie's going through and what it was like maybe for you also as a performer to do this?
Yeah, so as Christin stated earlier, in the second arc, it's not a fresh start. They have lived through all of these things, and Jackie, she remembers, and it's really her dealing with all of that. And once again, the frustration of feeling used, the frustration of feeling attacked and manipulated, and then finally kind of succumbing to old habits, as you can kind of see with the hand on the wrist. And it was intense as a performer to pull these emotions into your core and to expel them with force and authenticity. It was kind of gut-wrenching, and like it really kind of like makes me want to cry watching back at it.
Yeah.
And Allison and Camille, I think, both observed that struggle, and I think were deeply affected, but maybe weren't really sure how to address it. Stacy, do you have anything that you can tell us about Allison's state of mind watching that, and then afterwards with this bit of performance?
Yeah, I mean, Allison is very much watching Jackie's breakdown, and it's very emotionally affecting her. She's near tears, and so she's then coming forward and expressing that frustration, and she's about to notice Spence and perhaps see that maybe there's another chance for help. Maybe she shouldn't be doing it on her own, and
So,
maybe she needs to enlist some help.
right. And Elby, we can talk a little bit about Spencer's role. Spencer retreated, disappeared, sort of hid away for a little bit, but is being, I think, slowly coaxed back out and is trying to sort of re-enter the home and work with. Can you tell us maybe a little bit about uh, what Spence is thinking or trying to do?
Yeah, definitely. So Spence definitely had a upbringing of being kind of a playboy and everything being really neutral, and then was really attracted to Mac and his plan, and then realized that his plan was really toxic, and he got swept up in some stuff he did not feel good about, and then immense guilt and shame for that. Like the whole beginning of arc 2 is just Spence feeling terrible about himself, but not knowing what to do about it at all. And then now this duet, I'm like, yes, here is a chance for my redemption. Here I can do something good. Allison's going to tell me exactly what to do. Spence is most comfortable when somebody's telling him exactly what to do. So I'm like, once again, please tell me. And this was my chance for redemption. So I'm excited to prove that I'm not the bad guy I seem to be.
That's
We'll see how it
awesome.
goes.
Thank you. And then Anna, there's something going on up top as well. This is another moment when there's something happening on the upper level and the lower level sort of simultaneously. With this interaction between Mac and Camille, Anna, can you tell us what's going on up there?
Yeah, so I think this is kind of a moment where, Mac has tried to enlist Spence's help. It went terribly. And so in that process, he kind of found intrigue in this really enticing artist who he doesn't understand how to necessarily, like in a healthy way, because it doesn't have healthy skills, but work with. But he really wants Camille's help. He really wants Camille to be a part of his plan. And so he's trying to bring Camille in and convince Camille that this is something that she should be a part of.
Excellent. Now we see, I think, basically Allison's plan on the lower level sort of coming to fruition, testing the boundaries of cooperation, maybe. Stacy, how does this go, I guess, for Allison and for everybody down there?
Not too well,
Yeah.
unfortunately, as we're seeing here. It starts out well enough, and then she's now realizing perhaps that she put too much faith in Spence's character, that maybe he's still a bit too much of a playboy, or maybe he's just as susceptible as anyone might be to the draws of other times. And so he ends up enabling Jackie's character in uh, a little too much for Allison's liking, and again retreats to her back wall.
Yeah. So,
Uh,
yeah, it seems like Spence and Jackie are having a moment of maybe some revelry. They're enjoying themselves perhaps a bit too much. Maddie, can you maybe go into more depth about the interaction between Spence and Jackie?
Yeah, so in this moment, I think that they find like commonality in something that they both enjoy, albeit like different reasons.
Hmm.
Or maybe the same reason, but to different extents. Whereas she comes from a place of need and really like needing escape from her life. Spence maybe is more like, I find this enjoyable and fun, and I like an escape. So likening an escape versus needing an escape. And then yeah, it just really kind of compounded in on each other.
So, Melissa, can you tell us about Camille, sort of with the itching, the sort of restless? What is that?
What is that?
Camille's pissed.
Yeah.
She is. Woof. She's fired up. She thought she could trust Mac, and she misunderstood Mac's interest in her. It ended up being more superficial than she thought. She thought Mac could be someone who had enough self-reflection to perhaps reconsider how his power could be used in an effective way. And then Mac lashed out, and that wasn't true. And so she's pissed, and she's using her fury as a motivation, almost like a call to arms to, to lead in a way.
Okay. This is a really interesting part of the show, and it's going to be, I think, hard to dive into it as it's happening. But we've started what is essentially a very fraught square dance, and have enlisted the audience in participating basically and encouraging this square dance with rhythmic clapping. And then Faye and Puck have joined as well. Puck sort of calling the square dance as it goes. Now, this is a square dance, which is, I think, kind of an unusual influence, and not something that all of you would maybe use often in a dance piece, or be asked to dance in a dance piece. So, anybody that is wanting to maybe talk a little bit about that experience and sort of getting more comfortable with the square dance, I would love to hear about it. This is an open prompt.
I think
really hard on this section. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, what feels really important about this section is that square dancing is like, it's a social dance. It's about community. It's about relationships, about bringing people together, which it does that in this household, but they're all really going through something. So they're kind of trying to form and connect and have relationships, but it's all friction right now.
Perfect. It feels like almost everybody is sort of like caught up in the momentum of the square dance, but not really feeling entirely comfortable engaging in it. And Christin, why don't we talk about the audience participation again? Because this is something that you ask basically them to participate in with the clapping, which would, I think, normally be sort of a joyous occasion and a lot of fun, but clearly the dancers on stage are not having very much fun, which can, I think, cause, again, for the audience a little bit of friction. That I assume was intentional?
Yes. Sorry, audience, but the intention, yes, was to make people feel uncomfortable with participating in this like continuation of this cycle that never lets anybody move beyond this point. They're participating in the second downfall of this arc.
Can we talk a little bit about Puck's calls, the way that Puck led the square dance? Probably hard to hear during this particular version of the show, but if you have any insight into what Puck was saying and why?
Yeah, so he's using some, and kind of the language around it uses square dance calls, but it also pulls from some of the images and motifs that are part of the work, and kind of falls into this, like, we sort of had a Western style motif that we explored as a way to manipulate gestures and characterization. And so his words are almost driving them in the different patterns that they're making. And he's also commenting again, like he does with Mac earlier, and getting frustrated that that he's trying to get them to, well, there's a term in square dancing, to bring it back home, and that you're supposed to return to your partner, or return to the beginning spot, and it's like it's very ineffectual, basically, is how his calls end up being.
And this is sort of a disturbing moment of like chaos and breakdown, a lot of tension and pushing and pulling. But it's hard to necessarily assign any individual blame this time around. Or this breakdown, what sort of reason can we find behind it?
Well, this is a revisiting of those tableaus from the very, very beginning in Arc 1, except now everybody has to stay in handholds with each other and still try to make those tableaus happen. And it's this kind of entanglement in their interrelationships that is actually making it harder to be good to each other.
And Maddie, it seems like Jackie's having maybe the toughest time with this, and Just Here is maybe about to bring everybody into the final, basically, spin down. Let's see. What was like the breaking point for Jackie, and well, I'm trying to, again, think of a good way to phrase the question. Sorry. Struggling.
Yeah, I think in a way it was through like this high amount of touching that just happened, and forced proximity, and seeing her fellow family members, community people supporting each other, but just like really not feeling supported or wanted or a way out of her predicament. And I think that was the breaking point, was all of it just right up there in her face.
Thank you very much. That was the perfect answer to a very bad question. So Faye and Puck now are brought back onto the stage after once again the members of the household have failed to reach sort of a positive conclusion and have sort of spiraled into a great grand failure again. Now, Puck engaging with the mirror and turning it outward. Can you tell us, Christin, maybe about that, the significance of the mirror, and why for this section you chose to turn them outward towards the audience?
Yeah, this is the only part of the object that the docents ever touch. And so we wanted to be sure that if they did ever touch the object, that it was with care, right? They wear the gloves as a conservator would, and it's for a very specific reason. They're turning those mirrors towards the audience so that people are seeing their own faces reflected and present in the physical space of that house.
And Huck had a line there that I always sort of remember, the "Do you see a bed?" question that seems sort of directed at maybe Faye and the audience at large. What was the origin of that line, or was it, what was the purpose of utilizing it there?
Well, he's talking about how a home should be comfortable and it should be a place where you feel at rest and where you can physically lay down and be safe. And that line is pretty accusatory, like to the audience, asking.
I think we're gonna pause this
Yeah,
again
let's pause there.
and
Ask-
bring everybody back.
And it's basically asking the audience, do you see a place where anybody can rest in this house? And the very, very obvious answer is no. There's not a restful place.
So that was Arc 2 of What is Home. So again, a very dense bit of choreography with a lot of meaning behind it. And I guess the first thing I want to do is maybe ask if there was something that I did not address or that we did not get a chance to talk about that any of the five of you would really like to bring up. I know it's
Open-ended.
Yes.
I think one thing that was coming up for me just rewatching it was, I think especially like from arc 1, and then there's a couple moments here where the characters just, they kind of get swept up in their like nuanced and intricate relationships and all of the different ways that that's not quite functional. And then there's like this big moment that happens, and then there's another, it's always followed by a moment of realization of, oh, we just did a really like harmful thing, and then kind of having to reckon with the damage that they've done. um, and then yeah, and so it kind of, I think a lot of what happens here in these moments is highlighting the ways that if we're not careful, if we're not intentional with the ways that we communicate and interact with the people in our home spaces, in our lives, in our communities, it can lead to serious harm. And so I think what comes later is a little bit of intentionality that fixes some of that. But yeah, these moments of, oh my God, what did I just do? There's a lot of that happens there.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to talk a little bit more maybe about the square dance section specifically, because it is a unique section and probably worth diving into sort of why. Well, first, Kristen, why a square dance at all? I guess.
It actually kind of, well, okay, two reasons. One is that my home state is Kansas, and there is a tradition of cowboys and square dancing, and I do remember doing a little bit of square dancing in elementary school as part of the curriculum. So that's a little bit part of my heritage and understanding of geographical home and place. Second reason is like a little bit strange, but it comes from George Balanchine. I was actually looking at some of his works during this, and we did nickname some of the sections after some of his pieces, but he does have a work called Square Dance, in which there is a real square dance caller who has a written thing that is, predetermined. But it is pretty lively, and it does bring into play this a sense of spontaneity and social dance and community. another thing I would bring up is that there was this rise of square dancing. The reason that I learned it in elementary school was to kind of like combat the rise of like jazz and black artists. So it was something that Nixon reintroduced to the school curriculum in order to specifically create a counter idea
Right.
to the more free-form jazz music and jazz dancing that was happening.
Isn't that lovely? A bit of history. Melissa, I think maybe you had a little bit. I'll ask you maybe about the experience of dealing with the square dance in choreography, if that's something that you had ever done before, if it was especially challenging for you as a dancer.
This was, for me, probably the most challenging section in the work, and I think some of the other dancers would probably agree with me.
Maybe all of them.
Yeah, it was the counting and the musicality was really challenging. But I think the hardest thing was just figuring out the logic of the square dance with an odd number of dancers, because there was always one person that didn't have a partner and they would be having a solo moment. And it was really difficult to figure out the timing of how we can change partners, keep everyone on the same timing, keep the soloist who's doing different choreography on similar timing, and then rotate the square. Because like a traditional square dance, I also have experience doing it in elementary school at school. I grew up in Northern California, and it rotates, and we were trying to replicate that, but with really complicated contemporary post-ballet choreography. And there were some heated rehearsals in a good way, in still a productive way, but it was tough, but we figured it out.
I think another layer of challenge to that was that on top of everything that Melissa mentioned, you were also trying to remember who your character is and how they interact with each of these changing partners. So from like moment to moment, your emotional state was also shifting, whether your character was, for in Allison's case, interacting with Camille, who she's sort of sees as an ally, versus with Spence, who has sort of gone against her. And so she has a lot more animosity and anger toward Spence's character, or Spence as a person. And so with all of that quick change, you're having a lot of these really quick emotional states as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that insight. Let's see.
Do we have any audience questions?
Yes. So I did want to remind people again that if you have any questions about that arc, any questions for any of the specific performers, or even arc 1, anything that you've seen so far, go ahead and throw that in the YouTube chat and we'll address it. I will check real quick and see if we have any fresh questions. I don't think so, except for a question about the yellow wallpaper. Are you familiar with the yellow wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins?
I am not familiar with that.
Then that question is no. Let's see. I also want to check real quick.
Another picture to look at.
In a more artistic interpretation of what is comfy. Let's jump in there.
Let's look at it.
This is another post from Eileen with the what is comfy hashtag.
Being naked
and dancing around.
It's comfy. Yeah. Oh yeah, it is.
I'm going to jump back because
it's the square dance circus.
Yes, Anna said that it was just like the square dance kind of pull push and pull, circle.
Yeah.
Maybe they're having a better time than the square
They
dancers
do look
were having.
like a, yeah.
Let's see. Is there any more sort of final observations from Arc 2 that any of you would like to go into before we move on to the next bit? I think maybe it's time to move on then.
Yeah, let's do
Okay. I'll do one more check here. All right. Yeah, let's move into the third and final act and get kind of deep into that bit. I did pause it. I remembered. All right, let's start. So again, the characters are awakening from yet another failure. But it seems like maybe tonally this time around it's a little bit warmer and more hopeful.
Well, not quite yet.
Not yet.
Right now, I think everybody is very exhausted, primarily. Again, it's a return. It's the way that each arc starts is with these sort of habitual routines, and this is that bank of movement that was referred to earlier. And they're not really even moving around the space like they did in that first arc. They're just in one place, just trying to get through the motions.
And Kristen, I actually didn't give you a chance to tell people what to look out for in Arc 3, so you can talk a little bit about.
So yeah, I'd look out for Allison and the things that she is observing. She notices a really special moment between Jackie and Camille in which their movements actually align. And it gives her some insight on how to move forward. And I would say Allison as a character is really very brave. She makes a lot of mistakes, but she still keeps trying.
Yeah.
She learns from it, and then she does something different and just tries that.
Yeah, Stacy, Allison seems to be trying again, kind of getting back on her feet. And can you tell us maybe a little bit about Allison's thought process and what about Allison's character makes her capable of leading again in this way?
Well, I think, as Kristen said, she learns from her mistakes and then realizes, okay, I need to maybe try a different strategy. And so unlike her previous attempts, in Arc 1, she just kind of rushes in like a bull trying to fix things and then learns from that. And so in Arc 2, she's like, okay, well, maybe I need a little bit more strategy. And she enlists someone to help her or to be like her proxy, but maybe doesn't think very clearly about who that proxy is. And I think in this arc here early on, she notices Camille and that perhaps this is someone to trust, but instead of just rushing right in, she has like this conversation with Camille. And I think it's, they do this very coordinated, cohesive movement together, and they really kind of formulate that cohesive plan so that then when she steps away, she's here now observing how that's happening and sees that maybe it's actually working this time, kind of that she's learning from those previous errors or quick to judge or quick to act, and she's really just kind of learned a new way.
And I think what we're seeing more often in this arc, something that we didn't see very often at all previously, was moments of the performers and the dancers being in sync and doing the same thing at the same time, which was up until now, I think, pretty unusual. let's see. I guess we're moving into the interaction now between Camille and Jackie. This conversation. Maddie, Melissa, one of you can maybe tell us a little bit about this conversation and what each of you is learning.
I would say that this is the first interaction Jackie has had within these arcs, of truly being seen, truly feeling supported, in a way that she has never experienced before, of someone kind of empathizing with the situation that she's in. So that's what she's going through within this.
And on Camille's side, Melissa?
Camille's really motivated to build Jackie up and support her, and allow her to be seen, give her an opportunity to be seen and heard. And this was one of my favorite moments in the piece. Actually, I loved this duet. It felt very tender to perform this with Maddie. Felt very genuine. I always loved it.
I agree. It was, I think after the whirlwind of the piece, the tenderness was real. I loved it too. Yep.
Anna, I want to give you a chance maybe to talk a little bit about what Mac is thinking and doing. It's very much a background role that Mac has taken, which is unusual, I think, for the character of Mac. So why the background role this time, and is there growth in the character maybe that has prompted that?
Oh God, I like to hope so. Yeah, I think that in the first arc, he tried, he failed. The second arc, he tried again. He tried to manipulate Melissa. She pushed back in a way that was substantial and forceful and very badass, if you ask me. And so like seeing that kind of strength, I think does kind of inform his decision to maybe take a step back, do a little reflecting. I don't want to say that he's a fully changed person after this part, but I do think he does stand back and watch a little bit here, and then later does grow because of it.
Stacy, I want to talk about Allison right now, because you see sort of Allison in the background start to move very energetically, very joyously. There's a real positive sort of energy to Allison at this moment. So I was hoping you could give some insight into that.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what's happening. Christin had tasked me with basically improvising for what ended up being about 2 minutes of time while the Jackie Camille relationship was happening more in the foreground. Which I can't say I was like ecstatic about in the beginning. But then as I kind of thought on it more, I kind of decided this is her like party. She's just like having a party on her own back there. She's like swinging around the post. And as you said, just being really joyous. And I think you see for the first time in this whole piece, she actually like smiles and is just really proud of what she sees happening. That people are coming together, that Jackie's being seen, and in a way that's allowing her to be lifted up. And so she's just having a party back there all on her own.
Yeah. Maddie, let's talk about the solo that's been going on a little bit. Jackie, I think, is having a solo moment on the front of the stage, which has happened a couple of times before, but maybe this time it feels a little bit more at ease and a little bit less full of tension. What did you, I guess, hope to communicate with that bit of solo work that had changed in Jackie?
Yeah, so after the moment with Camille, that interaction, it's like there's the light at the end of the tunnel and you can just barely see it. And it's kind of digging within yourself for the strength to fight for it, to fight for that hope that you're kind of feeling, reaching out to something that you thought was maybe not possible, and realizing that, wow, actually something might have changed. So it was a lot of those kinds of feelings of kind of being saved in a way.
Yeah. There's we're into the final portion of the show now. The show ends with everybody sort of lifting Jackie together, moving forward together, and then there's a final sort of harmonious hum from all of the performers at the very end. I don't let's see. I don't know exactly who to call on to talk more about that. Maybe Kristen. Actually, Kristen, can you talk a little bit about that final moment?
As I recall, it was a moment that had come to my brain kind of early on in the process. I did know that what I felt would bring this group of people to a place where they could all potentially thrive was by lifting up the person at the bottom. And I wanted to show that with that person literally being lifted in the air. Also, that person directing the consent around that action, so that the others are basically holding space with her. So I knew that I wanted that to happen. And the vocalization, I feel like it happened in rehearsal when we were testing it out. The first few times, I don't remember specifically how it became the hum.
I'm gonna bring everybody back.
Or was that really late? Maybe it was in the theater even.
Yeah, so that is of the three arcs is the shortest, but there's still, I think, a lot to sort of talk about what happened and the conclusion that was reached, what it really meant. So first, I guess, just wanted to talk about the choreography because it seemed like finally at the very end there, for possibly the first time ever, maybe there's little bits of full sync in arc 1, but in arc 5, it's the first time that arc 3, sorry, the first time that all 5 of them are together and doing the same thing at the same time. And what was the I guess as dancers, having this long hour-long plus show of never quite feeling that you're all moving as one, was it a great relief, even just as dancers, to have that moment where you all get to move together? I'll just call on Elby maybe for this.
Yeah, it really was. It was a lot of the character work was very internal, and it's a really incredible experience to be a performer and on stage for an hour going through an emotional experience. And I feel like in our careers, it's a little bit rare to actually get that opportunity to have that hour long performance feeling. And to go through so many dark moments and so much like internal, my character go through so much guilt and shame and then optimism and then guilt and shame again. So to finally feel like, oh, we're doing something right, we're doing something that's actually moving in a direction that is good and we're together, it was quite a relief. And to get, even though we were doing different things at different times, to get emotionally synced over time was really powerful too. And to feel that emotional synchronicity at the end was really cathartic. Yeah. So did feel good.
And I guess we can talk about briefly those sort of repetitive vocalizations and actions. In that final bit of synchronicity, you pulled out, I think, some of the basically the language, I guess you would call it, of movements and sounds, with the sort of the operatic and the sort of hissing noise. Christin, can you give some insight maybe into those motions and those sounds and what they were meant to convey?
Sure. So I kind of like to start from a place in which movement and sound are arbitrary. It's a weird, maybe it's a weird place to start, but language, sounds are they don't mean anything on their own. The letter A is nothing, but we give value, we assign meaning to it by putting it in this combination of other letters to create a word that then we give purpose to. So I like to treat creating a work the same way, that we can try out these really random combinations of things and then we can choose what it means. So that phrase actually originated before we started working on the piece in earnest as a cast. I developed that phrase with Marissa Quimby and Natasha Greenwald and Mariko Nagashima when we were in Italy. We did a residency there. And it was just a task in which I said, you have this many counts and you have to make this many sounds and then we're gonna put them all together. That was the beginning of that. And then when we did all of that character work, I feel like that was really when that started to become meaningful, and also not just meaningful in general, like that doesn't really have like a specific meaning per se, but for each character, it's a way that they express themselves, and it's a way that they exist in that world.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that really answers your question. The operatic singing part of that phrase, you see that in various places throughout the
Mm-hmm.
work, and it means different things every time.
Perfect. Let's see. First, I want to address the audience at home. We're going to talk a little bit more about the piece, but I do want to give one more chance for people to ask sort of questions. So go ahead and put those in the YouTube chat if you have any final questions, and we'll address them soon. I want to take a second to sort of reflect on the experience as a whole and maybe what it's been like to revisit. So Anna, if I could start with you, if you could tell me a little bit about what it was like for you to revisit this work 2.5 some odd years later, and how you look at it now.
Yeah, so this was the first time I had done any serious character work as a performer. Previously, I haven't done anything where I was really a character with a very strong backstory that would be presented so really like very accurately on stage. So it was definitely a challenge, but one that I was really excited to do. But then it was interesting that I don't like Mac. He's really the epitome of everything that causes me strife in this world. So I think that was a really good challenge. And looking back at it now in the world that we're currently living in, I think we were familiar with powerful figures similar to Mac at the time that this piece was produced in 2018. But I think now, having lived through a global pandemic and being really failed by a lot of our power sources at play, and seeing a lot of selfishness, a lot of greed, and while so many people have suffered, there are so many people in the situation of Jackie, or even I think of the artists like Camille, even now we're artists here watching ourselves do this art that we haven't been able to do in a year, while people like Mac are fine. So I think, yeah, it's that I think about the moment where Mac is put on display and kind of this flashlight is shined on him and he is shamed in front of the entire audience and has to kind of bewilder in. And that moment is one that feels really poignant now. And I think that, then to get to the end of the piece where Mac decides to use his resource and his privilege to help and to lift up the people who need to be lifted up and to stop putting himself first feels, it feels really powerful. And it's the ending that I want for all of us in real time.
Agree.
Does anyone else have any thoughts about sort of revisiting? Want to give a quick opportunity. I'll look for an unmute symbol. Otherwise, I will call on one of you. It's okay. Melissa, maybe you can tell us, kind of revisiting the piece, reviewing it this way, what sort of memories were brought back? What stuck out to you? What was especially affecting? What do you remember fondly from this piece?
Mm-hmm. It was really fun to revisit the piece and have all of the memories of the process come back to me. This was a relatively extensive process. I think we were in rehearsal for 7 months, but 8 hours per week, which is a good chunk of time. The most challenging part of the process for me was the character work and the vocalizations. Similar to Anna, I don't have a lot of experience with that, and it was definitely a stretch for me to feel comfortable to explore that, explore character work, but more so the vocalizations. I feel very shy in that way. So as an artist, I felt very stretched and challenged in a good way, and I'm grateful for that experience for sure. And I think what stood out to me most about this process was being able to contribute ideas and content and being expected to contribute ideas and content and have that information valued and received and like truly integrated in the work. It was a very collaborative process, and those are the ones that are the most meaningful to me.
Excellent. Stacy, I wanted to maybe ask you a little bit about, Allison, about your character or about all the characters in general. I think the thing that I noticed talking to all of you today, and something I kind of knew, but I'm reminded again, is that you have a deep, deep understanding of your characters and their motivations and their thought processes through the whole piece, whether they're in the front or in the background. I guess I just wanted to ask you a little bit about how you view Allison, if your thought process on Allison has changed now that you're a little bit removed from that process.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a lot of that comes from a few different factors. One being all of the prompting and research that we did during the creation process of creating these whole people. As Anna and Melissa already, touched on, we weren't just creating these abstract characters. We were really trying to create real live people, somebody that you could go out on the street and meet. And so, and then another factor being that, as Elby said, like what a privilege it was to have a whole hour length production. But then on top of that, we have this set design in which you don't ever get to leave the performance. And that's, I think, a big rarity for performers as well, especially in like the traditional theater sense. Even if a production is an hour, or like a story ballet where it's, maybe a couple hours long, or an opera several hours long, you're not on stage for the full duration of that performance. You get sort of these breaks from being seen. And we didn't have that here. So you had to literally be in character, and not just like sort of in character, but like you had to be 100% invested in who this person was for the full hour, because you were always seen, even, in the back, you were still visible. And so I think that is what created a lot of the depth to what the audience got to see and sort of participate in, is that we had these sort of whole real people in your face, whether they were the front of the story or in the background for a full hour. And I think for me, you know, stepping away from the character and then having to now come back and sort of observe it from the outside, um, I have a lot of the same viewpoints of my character, but I also have a more realistic idea about her and her struggles. And, I think I had, being in the middle of it, like I think we might often think about being in the middle of situations. We have a little bit of a maybe grandiose idea of what's happening, and it's very one-sided, perhaps, not necessarily maliciously, or but just, it's our point of view, our perspective. And so now watching Allison as an observer, while still having all of that information from the inside, I get to see more her faults that perhaps she didn't see um, in herself. But
Yeah.
now, as on the outside, I get to see those faults in her, um, and see them with more clarity than I think she saw them. I don't think she saw them at all. I mean, I think she realized she was making mistakes, but I don't necessarily think that she was like a flawed person in doing so, or I don't think she saw it in that same way.
Right.
So there's definitely a clarity seeing it from the outside, um, as an observer.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, I think all the characters have some pretty pronounced flaws. Yeah. But in the end, still finding a way to grow, even if it's small. Like, I think actually probably max growth, although it's the most visible change is actually the smallest. Like, all he has to do is kind of step back, you know?
Just shuts up for 1 minute
You're
and we all
right.
clap.
But I do kind of, I admire the character of Allison, even though she bumbles through things a lot. It doesn't actually stop her from trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the kind of courage that I would like to have also.
I think
Awesome.
perhaps she had some of the courage I wish maybe many of us all had, myself included. I get to sort of play out fantasy a bit through her.
Great. I think now it is time to sort of wrap things up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give everyone in the cast a chance to sort of talk a little bit about what they've been up to since the show in the last couple of years, what they're up to now. So I'm going to, again, change the view a little bit so the speakers can have a little bit more face time. And Stacy, I will call on you first. What have you been up to, and what's
Yeah.
going on in your life now?
Oh, goodness. Well, somehow a lot and yet not a lot all at the same time.
Isn't that how it goes?
But specifically recently, I've actually returned to assisting Kristen with some of the administrative tasks of Coriolis while she's interim executive director. It was something I did a few years back, overlapping with the production of this piece, and then I left the position for to pursue other things, and then now I'm kind of back behind the scenes, giving some assistance again. And then, in addition to that, I'm a Pilates instructor, and I've been a Pilates instructor for, I don't know, like 14 some odd years now. And I've had to make some transitions as a Pilates instructor, given the various restrictions of the past year, it was really tough with a lot of closures. I was able to pivot much of my teaching schedule online with some of my amazing clients and students who were willing to adapt as much as we were able. But during all of that, the space that I was utilizing for in person sessions when we were allowed to be open uh, had to also make some hard choices. And basically, it left me with no place to return to in person teaching. So for now, I just continue seeing my clients and teaching classes online, but I am currently searching out a new studio space so that I can at some point resume in person training. So if you want to know more about that, you can see more about what I offer and who I am as a Pilates instructor at my website, which is stacybpilates.com. And you can also follow me on social media, though I'm not very good at that, but it's also at Stacy B Pilates.
Did you get
Great.
those links in the description?
They are.
Yeah. So any YouTube viewers can find the links to Stacy's Pilates website and Instagram account at the links below the stream. Elby, I think you're up next. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've been up to?
Yeah, since this production, I focused a lot on a collaborative dance group that I founded called Drama Tops. We like to bring together modern dance and queer nightlife and explore gender and queerness. And you can find out more about that by following our Instagram, which is at drama_tops_official. I also have been dancing a lot for the drag queen Bendela Creme. And this past year, we were able to make a movie out of her annual Christmas show, and it actually got picked up by Hulu. So if you have Hulu and you feel like watching a Christmas show, it's the Jinx and Dela holiday special. You can find it there. And finally, during the pandemic, I have been exploring a new passion of mine, which is woodworking. So I'm going to Seattle Central's wood technology program and learning how to make custom furniture. So that's been really rewarding. And that's what I've been up to.
Awesome. Thank you. Maddie, you're up next. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on for you?
Yeah, so since the production, I have become a board member for Coriolis Dance. So I now sit on the board of directors. And I was a rehearsal assistant for Christin during the process for Ad Astra Per Aspera. And now I have become kind of communications chair, and I am running a ton of social media, as well as helping teach some of the post ballet praxis classes. So once a week, I teach post ballet youth and post ballet playground, and we get down and wiggle. And right now, Kristen and I are kind of recreating and looking back at our dance telephone and seeing what we could potentially create with that material that we investigated last year during quarantine.
Excellent. Thank you. Anna, what have you been up to?
Hi, yeah. So I took a little time off after the show to rehab a shoulder injury, but then I created a work actually at the Shed. I did a residency there. Yeah, where Kristen and Devin are
Our
right
studio,
now.
yeah.
I did a residency there with a Seattle visual artist. His name is Ryan Hatfield, and we made a immersive installation movement work together called Malecancy. So I did that. And otherwise, I got my personal training certification, and especially during quarantine, my movement investigation has been less around dance and more around how to heal and sustain long-term stress in the body via movement and care. So that's what I've been doing. And it's been feeling really good to help people move and feel a little better through all of this craziness. But I have an Instagram handle, which is at Puzycki Fitness. And I work at a studio called Peaceful Training, which is on Boat Street in the U District. So yeah, and also I do a lot of depression dance parties in my kitchen, and that's great. I love dancing, so I have it.
Yeah, thank you. Melissa, why don't you tell us what you've been up to?
Oh,
Unmute,
unmute.
please.
Sorry.
We want to hear.
Okay, how to use technology. Hi. Since this production, I've performed in a couple other projects with some Seattle choreographers. And since the pandemic, I've been able to continue teaching hybrid and fully virtual at Rainier Dance Center and Bellevue College. And let's see, on Wednesdays, Anna and I do jazz funk and hip hop video tutorials, and that's been really fun. Still trying to dance as much as I can. A lot of it is just by myself in the studio.
Yeah.
I'm working on a dance film and another project with Kaleidoscope Dance Company, which is the junior company of Mosaic Dance Company at the Creative Dance Center. Let's see, what else? I think that's it. I recently made a website, melissasandersondance.com, and my Instagram is Melissa N. Sanderson. Thanks for watching.
Thank you very much. I'm going to give it the group view right here. I just wanted to say thank you very much to all 5 of you for coming back around and being willing to take this evening to discuss this piece with us. It was so nice to have all of your input and insight, and to see again and be reminded how much love and care went into this very special piece.
And I feel like I want to say something.
Go, yeah.
And I remember when I knew I wanted to make this piece, there was like this vision for it, and I was like, who are the dancers that would do this with me? And being so scared that I wouldn't be able to find people that would come on that journey, knowing that it would be challenging, that I would ask things that maybe people hadn't tried to do before, and that some of the content would be hard to get into and invest in. And I'm just so happy and grateful that it was the 5 of you. You're all very, very special people, and this performance has been, this work has been one of the highlights of my artistic career.
So I think with that, we're gonna say goodbye to the 5 of you. I just wanted to say again, thank you for joining us tonight, and we really appreciate everything that you did. Bye-bye. So real quick, we just want to go over again, if this is something, viewer, that you enjoyed, you can subscribe to the Coriolis Patreon. The evening's program is part of the Digital Mosaic season. Again, we're reaching through the digital maelstrom to stay connected to you. The Patreon is a part of that effort. As a monthly donation, it includes perks that gives you an inside look at the company, a lot like what you were able to see tonight. We're also, again, in the midst of our annual campaign, fundraising campaign. And so any signups for the Patreon or donations will be matched by the board up to $4,000. So again, just wanted to bring that up one last time before we signed off for good. Let's see, is there anything else that we need to...
Just thank you for being here with us, and giving us a chance to look back on this piece. Has I've gone down memory lane pretty hardcore with this, and it's wonderful. For me, it's wonderful to be able to speak about the craft of a work, and to share more in depth and to help bring more understanding to the process of like what is dance and how does it get made. So
Yeah.
thank you for this.
This is definitely something that I had wanted to do, or something like it, from 2018, to get a chance to really dive deep into this piece and explain everything that was going on, because there was so much to talk about. So this was a really fun opportunity for me as well. So I hope that everybody enjoyed. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a good night.